the government makes the point that these are supply side constraints. India's earning more money, people are wanting to consume more, and production is not keeping up, and therefore the government cannot be to blame. And we've seen Pranab Mukherjee, we've seen Chidambaram, we've seen Montek Singh Ahluwalia make the point that rising prices are now beyond the control of government mechanisms.
When food inflation is about to happen, it doesn't suddenly strike you like thunder. You can predict it, that rainfalls haven't been good, so food inflation might just happen. And if food inflation is about to happen, then you have to plan your steps ahead. So what are the steps that you can possibly plan ahead? One of them is import. If you go to import as a knee-jerk reaction, then obviously import prices are going to go up. Just like Pakistan did, you know, they bought from us at 20 rupees a kg onion, sold us back 45 rupees, and then they stopped selling it back. Because suddenly, if it's a knee-jerk reaction, these things, but if you plan it for 3 to 4 months, then this doesn't happen. So imports have to be planned very properly. Of course, there are some structural changes which need to take place. And one of them is that farmers need to be allowed to take their product straight to the market. This huge chain of middlemen make the price rise by about 400%. And this is one scare. And the bigger thing, of course, as Mr. Munjal pointed out, is that how can you sit, you know, so many years after independence and not have irrigation facilities available? You know, you have to have arable land, and that arable land which we have has to be irrigated.
Look at the previous 30, 40 years. We went in for land reform, which was completely contrary to now what we are talking today. At that time, land holdings were actually taken away from the bigger people and given to the smaller or the marginal farmers. So that was a land reform which was very relevant at the time of post-independence, and when we were in a stage where, you know, our country really needed to feel, you know, everybody needed to feel inclusive in the growth. But today, that same land reform policy of then is not going to do any wonders today. In fact, it has to be now disbanded or tried to be modified in a way where, while you maintain the ownership of the land, but at least, you know, pooling of the resources of the land, unless you make land a viable unit. Today, if you have a half acre, 1 acre or 2 acres of land, it's never ever going to be viable enough to have investment. Like you're talking of irrigation is an investment which the state makes. But a farmer also makes investments in irrigation by having hand pumps and tube wells and other, you know, equipment which he buys. If he has to get a tractor or get some modern scientific technology to, you know, till his land, he needs a larger holding. So I agree that there is a huge case now for agricultural reform, and that, of course, will not be the only driver of the economy, but at least will, I would say, to some extent, create a balance in the rural part of India, because rural India still has a large population, and that is one of the areas where, you know, we have really neglected. And one last point I want to make about this is that one side the government has been trying to increase the MSP, the price which the farmer gets. The flip side is that it pushes up the cost to the consumer.
Let's not forget that as the income levels of people have been going up, as the middle class has been growing, and not just in urban areas but even in rural areas, the eating habits have started changing. What one used to manage with very, very fundamental grains, today people are asking for vegetables, for fruits, and this is a great opportunity both for the farmer as well as for the consumer. And this is where I think structural reforms, which means how do you produce these products in the farms, how do you make sure that they're not wasted and they're not the prices are not increased by 400%, as Professor said, by the time they reach the consumer. So it's a great challenge as well as a great opportunity.
The fact is, these are reforms, the need for which is understood, but there's no action on the ground to implement them. We can have the same discussion 10 years later, and God alone knows whether by then any government has had the guts to bite the bullet.
I hate pushing numbers, but I'll give you a number. 1980, 141 million hectares were net sown area in this country. 2010, 140 million hectares. It's down. 540 million people were eating in this country in 1980. 1.2 billion people are eating now. You don't need to be an economist to understand that.
Pressure on land will always remain. It's a
But
question. That's
only
why.
if we increase
That's why
our
the issue
productivity.
everybody is addressing is of productivity.
Absolutely.
And therefore, you need more irrigation, more, I would say, modern techniques of farming, better seeds,
True.
and lots of. I mean,
No,
it's a huge issue.
And
which
I
has
think
to be
what
addressed.
Mr. Pranab Mukherjee did in his last budget, which probably went unnoticed, was that he said that the government can only do so much. We need private sector to come forward and assist us in warehousing, in storage. I think it got lost in that clutter. But this is an acceptance from the government that it cannot, as far as farm sector revival is concerned, it can only do so much. It needs the private sector. And that's why somewhere you need multi-brand retail to be thrown open, because only